For the last 2 years, Iowa fans have been begging for Iowa's coaching staff to bench quarterback Spencer Petras. This quarterback has become the laughingstock of the Big Ten and has been putting up historically terrible numbers. Unfortunately, he can't catch a break, and I genuinely feel bad for him. At this point, the weight of the Iowa fan base is on his shoulders, and it's clear that Iowa should go with another quarterback, and Ferentz might need to play another guy. Unfortunately, there's nothing but negativity surrounding his name, but we're going to change that in today's video. We're going to tell this guy's story, go through his awesome high school career, why he was super hyped up coming out of high school, and ultimately talk about what has happened at Iowa and why I think he has been struggling. But before we get started, we are on the road to 100K, so quickly be sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like if you want to support today's video, turn on post notifications, and let me know what player I should cover in my next video. Now, let's talk about Spencer Petras. Petras has a very interesting story as he comes from San Rafael, California. That is the home of Jerry Garcia, the iconic singer from the band The Grateful Dead. Petras considers himself a deadhead and even held his high school graduation party at Phil Lesch's restaurant called Terrapin Crossroads. It's definitely one of the more unique things, and one Iowa coach said he had never met an Iowa player who was a fan of The Grateful Dead. Going over to his sports career though, at the age of 2, he began to play sports. His parents would not allow him to play tackle football until 8th grade though, but at 5 years old he was playing baseball, basketball, and soccer. He eventually went to Marin Catholic High School, which recently had a notable alum at quarterback. His name was Jared Goff. He rewrote the record books there, became a superstar at Cal, was drafted number 1 overall, and is now starting for the Detroit Lions. Spencer Petras had grown into a big-time quarterback at that point, and arrived looking to replicate him, except it didn't start fast. In the summer before high school, him and his family would go on a tour around Europe, and that would cause him to miss his high school's football camp, which at the time, Spencer said was the worst thing his parents could have done for him. Luckily though, Spencer was a guy who worked hard and didn't give up. In his freshman year of high school, he was the 3rd string quarterback and also played defensive lineman. Unfortunately, he broke his throwing arm in the 2nd game of the year and was supposed to miss the rest of the season, except he was always around. Petras' mom said, quote, "Adversity really got him pumped up. When you can't have something, yet you want it that bad, you figure out a way to get it. He worked so hard, and he was the number 1 guy running, giving guys drinks on the sideline, and cheering on his teammates. Obviously from that, he grew, got better, became a leader, and eventually moved up to JV as a sophomore, and was eventually the varsity quarterback as a junior. At the time, he was a tall and physically big quarterback, and amassed over 3,000 passing yards and 30 touchdowns, with 7 more rushing scores on the ground. This got the attention from big-time football programs, including Cal, Louisville, Syracuse, Fresno State, and Oregon State. He decided he was going to end his recruitment in May of 2017 and committed to the Beavers over those other schools, and Beavers fans were pumped. The best part is Petras would only get better. Everything was pointing for him to be the next big thing in Oregon State, but then Gary Anderson was fired. At the time, Petras opened up his options and had this to say, quote, "I'm still committed to Oregon State. I'll cross the bridge when I get to it if it happens. I can't speak to the situation until I know about it, but for right now, I'm committed to Oregon State." As his record-setting senior season continued, it would get halted in his high school playoffs, as an hour after losing, he was thinking about college. He boarded a plane towards Iowa City, and apparently had an incredible visit. 24 hours later, he flipped to Iowa from Oregon State, saying, quote, "Through diligent thought, counsel, and prayers, I decided to move my commitment from Oregon State to the Iowa Hawkeyes." He chose the Hawkeyes over other big offers including Cal, Louisville, and Syracuse, but why Iowa? He said, quote, "Primarily I loved Iowa City. It's a great place, and it's much bigger than I expected. It really surpassed my expectations. It was great to meet Coach Ferentz and the rest of the staff in person. I met with quarterbacks coach Ken O'Keefe, and meeting the players and feeling the atmosphere there was amazing." This was odd for Iowa, as they were not actually used to getting good quarterback recruits, and Petras had incredible stats. As a senior, he completed 64% of his passes, throwing for 4,157 yards and 50 touchdowns with only 2 picks. His high school coach grew numb to how good he was. He said, quote, "When I put on Spencer's film recently to show a couple of younger guys, he's a monster. I mean, the dude's a freak when you look at him. At the time, when you're around him day to day, you sort of forget how big he is and how powerful of an arm he has. Since you see it every day, it's just the norm. But when you look back at it, you sort of chuckle and say, oh my gosh. That guy was bigger than most of the linemen out there, and he's throwing the ball 70 yards downfield from the high school hash and then throwing a deep out. Jeez Louise. Not only was he great, but he was also praised for his work ethic, and some sites even had him as a 4-star recruit. Despite not having that on 24/7 Sports, they were still high on him, as he was a high 3-star, the number 19 pro-style quarterback, and the 421st best player in the class of 2018. Petras would break all of Jared Goff's records as a senior, as he became the all-time leader in single-game passing yards, single-season passing yards, and single-season touchdowns. In 2 years, he finished with 7,248 yards, 84 touchdowns, and 10 picks, with over 500 yards and 16 touchdowns on the ground. This would get his school to a pair of championship game appearances and 1 state title. Going from the Grateful Dead-centered town in Cali to the cornfields of Iowa was going to be an interesting change for Spencer. He said, quote, "It's different than Marin. The people are different and it's much more laid back. It's a different culture and a nice change of pace. I really enjoyed the lifestyle out there. It'd be a major change for him, but how would he end up doing at Iowa?" Petras would arrive as the backup in 2018, and he was behind a star quarterback in Nate Stanley. In 2018, he'd play in 2 games, and in 2019, he'd play in 3 games. Going into the 2020 season, he would battle it out with Deuce Hogan and Joey Labus for the starting job, and eventually, he would win that job. In his first career game against Purdue, he'd throw for 265 yards, but they'd end up losing 24-20. The following week, he'd throw 3 interceptions in a loss to Northwestern, before he'd have a touchdown in a win over Michigan State. Iowa had not started 0-2 since the year 2000, but Petras righted the ship. He scored a touchdown in their win over Minnesota, had a touchdown in a win over Penn State, had a touchdown in a win over Nebraska, and then finished really strong. He had 3 touchdowns and no interceptions in a win over Illinois, and then had 2 touchdowns with an interception against Wisconsin. His freshman year was all over the place. Petras would throw for 9 touchdowns and 5 interceptions while completing 57.1% of his passes. He threw for a total of 1,569 yards, and 3 out of those 5 picks came in the second half against Northwestern. To be honest, he didn't actually look that bad, and many people were hyping him up for the 2021 season. Unfortunately, it was very disappointing. He beat back-to-back ranked teams in Indiana and Iowa State, and then also took care of Kent State and Colorado State before he'd have his best game of his career. In the first weekend of October, he went on the road to Maryland and threw for 259 yards with 3 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns. The Hawkeyes were now 5-0 and ranked inside the top 10 for a showdown with number 4 Penn State. This was a really strange game, but after getting down early to Penn State, Petras and the offense would make enough plays, and they'd take a 23-20 lead late and upset the number 4 Nittany Lions. In that game, Petras had 2 touchdowns, and helped Iowa jump up to number 2 in the country. Unfortunately, the following weekend, he might have had his worst game of his career. He didn't throw a touchdown and had 4 interceptions and a 24-7 blowout home loss to Purdue. Things didn't get any better the following week as he threw for 93 yards in a blowout loss to Wisconsin, and then would have 4 passing yards against Northwestern. He finished the year with a touchdown against Nebraska before getting benched in the Big Ten championship game after starting out horrifically. After that Penn State game, things really got difficult for Petras, and the bowl game wasn't much better. He threw 3 interceptions in a 20-17 loss to Kentucky, and would finish the year with 1,800 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. He had a QBR of 49.2, and throughout the season, many were calling for him to be benched for good. As we headed into 2022, Iowa would arguably lose their 2 best weapons in Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy to Purdue, so things were only going to be more difficult on him. They'd have to find a new running back, and Tyler Linderbaum was gone off the offensive line. So far, this has mightily affected Petras, as he has had a horrific start to the 2022 season. In their 7-3 Week 1 victory over South Dakota State, Petras would go 11 of 25 for 109 yards without a touchdown and had a QBR of 1. This has got to be one of the worst QBRs in college football history, if not the worst. And to nobody's surprise, he was the lowest in the Big Ten, and no other quarterback posted a rating below 50. Things didn't get any better in Week 2, as after throwing an interception in the first half against Iowa State, he had added to a weird streak. In his last 8 games, he had 9 interceptions and just 1 touchdown. Despite Iowa only scoring 14 points through the first 7 quarters of the year, they'd have a chance to beat Iowa State, but they missed a late field goal, and this is when things really started to get bad for Spencer. After the Iowa game, Petras was widely scrutinized, but Ferentz said in the press conference, quote, "No, we are sticking with Spencer." So how has he done since then? Well, against Nevada, he threw for 175 yards and a touchdown in their win, and then in a 17-point victory over Rutgers, he threw for 148 yards. This past weekend, the Hawkeyes would host number 4 Michigan, and Petras actually did somewhat okay. The offense was actually a little bit better, as he threw for a total of 246 yards for a touchdown and completed 68% of his passes. They only lost to the Wolverines by 17 points, and Petras is slowly getting better. Many have said that Spencer Petras is one of the worst starting quarterbacks in college football history. I don't really have the data to dispute that claim right now, as based on the numbers he has put up over the last 12 to 15 games, I would not at all be surprised. But why has he struggled? I've come up with 5 reasons. The first one is the system absolutely stinks for passing. Iowa quarterbacks are not made to put up big numbers to begin with, but with the running backs not doing their part, the system is pretty much stacked against Spencer. Secondly, he is not mobile. As we look back, he wasn't an all-pro at running the ball, but he was at least somewhat decent. Now that he's gotten to Iowa, he's pretty much a statue in the pocket. I don't think I've ever seen him take off and run with it. Thirdly, the offensive line is bad. They lost Tyler Linderbaum to the NFL, and they've thrown a couple pieces around, but nothing has seemed to work. Some are saying it's one of the worst Iowa offensive lines in years, and in that case, he's a guy who's immobile and doesn't have time. And fourthly, lacks confidence. When an entire country is talking about how bad you are, I'm sure this has definitely gotten to Spencer's head, and it makes him think twice about passing or his judgment. You need confidence as a quarterback. Finally, there's no one to throw to. As I said, both Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy left for Purdue, and Sam Laporta was supposed to break out at tight end, but honestly, they just don't really have anyone to throw the ball to. Combining that with a bad offensive line, little confidence, no mobility, and a bad system, it's a recipe for disaster, and Spencer has gotten all the blame for it. I also think Kirk Ferentz needs to play someone else, and this is just a series of tragic events on Spencer. But what do you think? If you're an Iowa fan, what do you think of this current Iowa team? What do you think of Spencer Petras? And who's another quarterback who has been historically terrible? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.